Okay, this is our fifth video about monolithic versus layered. We're still talking about monolithic prosthesis. We discussed many different monolithic prostheses, and now we're going to talk about handling the monolithic prosthesis and proceed to layered prosthesis, and then after that the comparison between layered and monolithic, and then my own technique of monolayered, and then show many cases of different techniques and discuss cons and pros of both techniques. Let's talk about alloy monolithic handling tips. There isn't much to say about it, but casting tips, use different crucibles for different alloys because some people are still just not doing that, especially when it comes to semi-precious and precious. I still use different crucibles for gold than the silver palladium or the semi-precious. It's not costly, you just have different crucibles for different alloys, and then you will control contamination this way. While in the casting machine are more times when casting non-precious alloys. This is for the people who cast with the conventional centrifuge casting machine like myself, and less times as you use higher content precious alloys. Now, dental alloys vary from non-precious nickel beryllium to the highest gold content. Nickel chromium alloys are popular around the world, but are effectively banned in Sweden, for example, since nickel is known to cause contact dermatitis. It's not really just about the contact dermatitis that nickel causes, but you shouldn't be inhaling nickel or beryllium either. All right, so technicians and dentists must avoid inhaling nickel chromium fumes or grinding dust, especially if the alloy contains beryllium. Beryllium is toxic, and then even nickel, because many technicians kind of careless about this. Dentists by nature, they wear they wear face masks, and they wear gloves and everything. But us in the dental lab, we kind of overlook these things, and even though we're the one who grinding dust is mostly in the lab, so you should take this into consideration, especially if you use nickel chromium alloys. In my lab I only use nickel free non-precious, and I don't use that much non-precious anyway. But when I get a non-precious case, I only use nickel-free, beryllium-free non-precious, and it's almost double the money to buy nickel-free. It's cheaper. It's almost half the price to buy a non-precious with nickel. All right, nickel chromium alloy. But anyways, I'm just used to nickel-free. That's all I use, and I think it's justified. And I think when you go non-precious, you should consider going nickel-free. Now, use a different set of burrs and finishers should be used for each type of framework, and you should finish your framework one side to the other, not going back and forth, because that will create microfolds that will trap contamination inside of it. Okay, mirror image finishing, like we said. Now, mirror image finishing is preferred for all kinds of alloys except for titanium alloys. It's not recommended to buff finished. Actually, when I read this study, I didn't quite understand what do they mean by buff finished, but I figured that when you deal with titanium, say that you have a titanium abutment and you adjusted the neck of that titanium abutment a little bit, then it's recommended that you do the rubber sequence on finishing that part that you touched with a burr or with a greenstone or whatever. So you do the rubber sequence of making it, making it polished, but you do not use the polishers, the high polish. For some reason, it tends to make the titanium more susceptible to corrosion. All right. Now send that back. Who does PFMs anymore? Well, many people still do PFMs in this region of the world, here in the state of Qatar in the Middle East where I work. We rarely use any PFMs, honestly. PFMs are less than 10% of my work. Most of my work is zirconia and lithium disilicates. And we will discuss that in details. But in this state, it's not heavily populated. We're only 2 million in this country. And it's one of the highest incomes in the world because of gas and natural gas and fuel, petroleum that they have in this state. So we rarely use any PFMs. And if we're to use PFMs, we usually use porcelain fused to silver palladium or porcelain fused to gold. But even that we don't use that much. It's less than it's not even 10%, less than 10% of PFMs that we have in the lab. Mostly are zirconia and lithium disilicates. So what is this? This is a PFM. This is a porcelain fused to metal that I did once. All right. Now alloys, like we said, since we're talking about alloys and monolithics and handling tips of alloys, let's just touch up on alloys. Especially in this part of the world, people are confused about alloys. These are different alloys: full cast, non-precious, nickel-free, silver palladium, porcelain fused silver palladium, porcelain fused to gold, porcelain fused to 70% gold. This is the example that we gave before. This is 88% gold. This is 75% gold. Monolithic, number 7, number 6 and 5 are PFM, porcelain fused to gold, PFGs. That's the way they look. This gram technology, we stopped using that. We used it before as cores, galvanization. All right. Now, just for people who don't know or don't use high continent gold or precious alloys or noble or high noble alloys, this is the classification real quick. I took ginseng as a quick example. Ginseng porcelain alloys, you would notice that 40% and up gold, regardless if it's white gold or yellow gold, any continent of 40% and up would be considered high noble or precious, high noble alloys. All right, less than that will be considered noble. All the way down, they don't have non-precious. Ginseng don't have non-precious, so noble alloys is less than 40%. All right, now this is the classification: high noble, noble, and non-noble. This classification people use, and people use precious, semi-precious, and non-precious. All I want to point out here is that there is that's high noble equals precious, and then noble equals semi-precious, and then non-noble is non-precious. Okay, so that's why many people used to tell us that use the noble classification. It's better because it's high noble and then noble. You know, noble is better than saying semi-precious, because semi is a semi, partially, you know, partially precious, semi-precious. So you're better off saying noble than saying semi-precious. It just gives, you know, the illusion of being really noble, you know. Noble, high noble, non-noble, or precious, semi-precious, and non-precious. And all of these are porcelain alloys. CTE is studied and applied here, so you can't use it with porcelain alloys. Now these are crown and bridge alloys. You cannot layer porcelain on top of them. Okay, same thing. It's many alloys. I stopped buying crown and bridge alloys long time ago because I don't do much monolithic golds or semi-precious anymore. All right, and there's the universal alloys. But pretty much I buy from this chart. I buy porcelain alloys because I want to apply porcelain on most of the alloys, or most of the use of my metal or alloy is PFMs, and I rarely get full cast, rarely, and usually it's a non-precious full cast. And then to do a bridge like this, it has to be porcelain alloys because part of it is monolithic and part of it is layered. So I want something that works for both, so I buy from this chart. You can buy from Universal, you can buy for Crown and Bridge and save money just to do full cast if you still are doing a lot of full casts in the back, in the posterior region. All right, now these are some of the alloys that I use. From ginseng, I use these four, 88% silver palladium, 75%, 40% gold. All right, from others, I use other things. This is nickel free. And I have now from Argident, I have 52% gold, I think. And I have a bunch of other alloys that I can't recall at the moment. I don't use them like I indicated before. I don't use them that much anymore. Handling tips for monolithic lithium disilicates or zirconia. It's the same handling tips, whether you're handling lithium disilicates or zirconia when it comes to polishing and finishing and stuff like that. Except that zirconia is more sensitive to heat, and you have to use an aqua finisher for that. Now, wear of enamel caused by opposing metal-free crowns. There was a study for Dr. Edward McLaren and others in 2014. The study says that zirconia has less wear than lithium disilicate. Wear of the enamel opposing adjusted lithium disilicate and zirconia decreased following polishing. So a clinical significance of this is, clinical significance would be zirconia experiences less and lithium disilicate experiences equivalent occlusal wear as natural enamel. It is preferable to polish zirconia and lithium disilicate after adjusting to make them wear compatible with enamel. In other words, once you do selective grinding or adjustment or occlusal adjustments to your crown or your bridge, you should perform the sequence of polishing. Like I said, I know that Shofo has the best polishing sequence out there. You know, it's a conclusion of a study that I've read before. I saved it somewhere, that Shofo has given the best sequence of polishing when it comes to lithium disilicates and zirconias. So pretty much occlusal adjustments, you can send it back for glaze, or just go ahead and do the polishing of the occlusal surface. This will eliminate the wear of the wear of adjacent, the wear of opposing enamel. All right. Now, since we're talking about handling too, you see many technicians sandblast inside of the lithium disilicates. Actually, there is no need. All right, and sandblasting the inside of lithium disilicate. Okay, this is an Emax CAD, for example. Sandblasting the inside of lithium disilicate will reduce the strength of it. Okay, fracture strength will be reduced by sandblasting. Now, sandblasting zirconia is a different subject too. Many studies are against sandblasting inside of lithium disilicate or zirconia, and I've read a couple of papers for doctors in the US that do sandblast the inside of zirconia, core or monolithic. They do sandblast it with the chair side sandblaster. They use 50 microns particles, and they sand on a very minimum psi, like 1 psi or half psi. Okay, so it's minimum mechanical sandblasting for the inside of the zirconia, and they propose that this gives good better mechanical cementation properties to the zirconia, since we have an issue of zirconia cementation. Now we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna discuss etchable zirconia, and like I said, most studies are indicating that we should not sandblast for the fear of micro cracks. We should not sandblast the inside of zirconia or the inside of lithium disilicate. I just wanted to say that. And when it comes to lithium disilicate, we already etch the lithium disilicates prior to cementation. So you have chemical etching, and I don't see any reason why would you sandblast the inside of lithium disilicates anyway. So since there is a study against it, just I would advise that you don't do sandblasting, whether for zirconia or for lithium disilicate. If you want to go ahead and do it, just be very careful. Use 50 microns of aluminum oxide particles, and use very low psi pressure. All right. Now, the effect of zirconia surface architecturing technique on the zirconia veneer interfacial bond strength. In other words, etching the outside of the core before applying porcelain to it have shown that it's improved by etching. Okay, so in conclusion, this test improves interfacial bond strength between zirconia and the veneering materials by increasing the surface roughness of zirconia. Right, and we're going to talk about the etching of the inside of the zirconia and the effect of it with the mechanical interlock, mechanical interlock of cements, and why would people etch zirconia from inside. But etching the outside, the outer surface of zirconia, will give you a surface roughness of this zirconia, and it will aid in the interfacial bond between zirconia and the veneering materials. Now, anything that has to do with surface roughness of zirconia, whether the outer surface or the inner surface of this core, I think more studies should be performed and talk about this, because there is always a fear of micro cracks in the zirconia by roughening the surface, whether mechanically or chemically, and we will discuss chemically later, but even mechanically, that's why they do not recommend sandblasting. So there is a fear of micro cracks that will grow in the future. All right, so that's why all of this is still under investigation. Now, this is just these photos are courtesy of Dr. Muhammad Nabosi. This work that we did together. Monolithic lithium disilicates. All right, monolithic zirconia in the back, adjusted, occlusally adjusted, and then polished. All right, sequence of polishing, same thing. Monolithic highly polished zirconia crowns. What are these? If you want to take a guess, this is zirconia, monolithic. This has zero porcelain on top of it. It's monolithic, fully monolithic zirconia. If I recall correctly, it was pre-sintered colored and then a little bit stained afterwards, but it's only stains and glaze. All right, so those are monolithic zirconias. Monolithic are mostly manufactured by, what's the ways of manufacturing all monolithics? Casting, milling, pressing, and infusing. I haven't found much studies on infusing. How does it work? I think it could be a glidewell way of manufacturing prior to zirconia age or prior to zirconia evolution. I don't know what's infusing, but milling, pressing, and casting, that we can recognize and we know. All right, are feldspathic veneers considered monolithic or layered? It's just a question, but pretty much it's feldspathic. It's feldspathic. So if you say that they are of one layer, because you can bake it once and just glaze it, then it's monolithic. Or you can say no, it's layered because we use powder and liquid together, and you layer one layer on top of the other. It could be layered. It doesn't really matter. I just put this question up just for brainstorming. Now, practically speaking, should we glaze or polish monolithic prostheses after occlusal adjustments? It's more practical, as it's proven that it's less abrasive to the opposing to polish with a polishing sequence, and it's less visits for the patient, and it's a quicker solution as well. So practically speaking, if you do occlusal adjustment and that doesn't include the buccal surface by any chance, then you can just go ahead and polish the occlusal surface. It gives you it will eliminate the occlusal wear, the possibility of occlusal wear of opposing, and then it's even better than glazing. All right. Now we will proceed to layered restorative materials or layered prosthesis. We finished monolithic. We talked about monolithic and monolithic kinds and classifications and monolithic handling tips, and we talked about we touched up about different stuff: monolithic abutments, handling tips, alloys classifications, and all kind of stuff. Now we're gonna go into the second part of this long lecture, which is layered prosthesis. All right. When we talk about layered prosthesis, first we have to discuss the porcelain types or porcelain classification or ceramic classification, however you want to call it. Ceramic classification, there is many classifications of ceramics. All right. This is the classification that I will discuss in details. First of all, you know that ceramics or glasses are brittle and they fracture under very low strain. Ceramics can be classified by their microstructure. All right. They can also be classified by the processing technique: powder, liquid, pressed, machined, and they can be in this study they were broken down into 4 basic compositional categories with a few subcategories in category 2. So this is the classification that I will be talking about in details. Okay, I find that this is the very simple classification. There is other classifications, and like I said, you take the average of it. There's different classifications. I find that this will give you really the clear idea of ceramic classification on a basic level. All right, there's 4 categories in this classification. There's composition category 1, category 2, category 3, and category 4. The composition category 1, it's a glass-based system or mainly silica. All right, so it's a glass-based system, mainly silica. Composition category 2 is still a glass-based systems, mainly silica, but with fillers. Once you add fillers to it, it becomes a different composition category by itself. All right. Now there is composition category 3, which is crystalline. Now we're not talking about silica anymore. Now we switch to crystalline. Crystalline-based systems with glass fillers, mainly alumina. 4th is polycrystalline. The polycrystalline solids, alumina and zirconia. And details would be in next slides. Let's take them one at a time. Let's start with composition category 1, glass-based ceramics, mainly silica, no fillers, only silica. Those are like, remember the porcelain denture teeth? The porcelain denture teeth, the older way of doing porcelain denture teeth, that was composition category 1. Category 1 is the powder liquid virgin were made of the specific veneering of aluminum-based core system, example Inceram or Noble Procera, but not to be confused with the milled or infused Noble Procera. We're talking about a powder and a liquid. Powder and liquid Inceram or powder and liquid Noble Procera. Those are of category 1 as well. Now, some people classify Vita blocks, Mark II, the high continent porcelain that we talked about before, the CEREC CAD/CAM systems. The Mark II Vita block use with the CEREC CAD/CAM system, the one block that's milled that we talked about in the 4th category of monolithics. We said high glass continent, and we gave Mark II as an example. This Mark II, some people consider it category 1, which is high glass continent of silica without fillers. So this was category 1, okay? Now category 2 has 3 subcategories. That's the only category that has subcategories, which is category 2. And we said that it's the same thing. It's high continent of silica, but with fillers. Now these fillers could be, first, low to moderate lucite containing, and this is what's known as feldspathic porcelain. Example, VM13. Some people say VM9 too. Okay, so VM13 or Vita 13 feldspathic porcelain, that's an example of low to moderate lucite containing. That's subcategory 1 of the category 2. Now subcategory 2, let's call it 2.2, has high content of lucite, high lucite content. And this high lucite content, approximately 50%, this was developed in both powder liquid and machinable, and it's called Empress 1. That's the Empress 1 that came out from Evoclar Vivadent a long time ago. So Empress 1 falls into category 2, subcategory 2, category 2 and the subcategory 2. So notice that subcategory 1 and 2, these two subcategories are talking about lucite containing or lucite content. The lucite content, when it's low or moderate, it's subcategory 1, like the Vita VM13, or you're talking about subcategory 2, which is high lucite. An example of it is the machined or the powder liquid of Empress 2. All right. Now we come to subcategory 3. It has a totally different filler. The first two has lucite filler. The third one has a lithium disilicate filler. So lithium disilicate glass ceramics is a new type of glass ceramic introduced by Evoclar Vivadent as IPS Empress 2, now called IPS Emax. And we said that Emax doesn't really mean lithium disilicate for Evoclar Vivadent anymore, because now they call the Zircad, they call it Emax Zircad. So zirconium blocks, they're called Emax Zircad, zirconium CAD-CAM blocks. So Emax is not really, people refer to lithium disilicate as Emax, but really it's not a scientific term. We should say lithium disilicate glass. So category 2, with its 3 subcategories. The first subcategory is low to moderate lucite containing. The second subcategory is high lucite containing, Empress 1. And the third subcategory doesn't have lucite, it has lithium disilicate filler, and it's Empress 2. All right. So this is the subcategory 2, and this is important to know that feldspathic, Empress 1, Empress 2 are of the same category, the same family. This is very important, and we will discuss that in the following slide. Now, if you look at this slide is this photo is courtesy of Ayhan Farah CDT. He is a CDT with Evoclar Vivadent, technical expert. All right, and he posted this. Look, this is a lithium disilicate Emax medium translucent ingot, fully pressed and stained. So pretty much monolithic lithium disilicate Emax MT. All right. While this is a feldspathic IPS inline stacked on refractory. So this is a feldspathic porcelain, feldspathic veneer. The difference between the two veneers, I want you to look at it even after cementation and everything. Look at it. You wouldn't see much of a difference. Yes, I know that stacked over refractory or layered or feldspathic gives you more translucency wherever you want your translucency, more masking wherever you want masking, because you control by the tip of the brush the amount of masking or the amount of translucency that you want. I understand that. So here is much of masking here and there, and much of translucency wherever they want the translucency. While here it's more of homogeneous, it's more of one pressed material, monolithic. Yes, you can change a little bit with the staining, and with you can do more masking with staining. You can give illusions of translucency. You can do things in the pressed lithium disilicates as well. But yes, I understand that feldspathic is more creative and gives you more details, and you can characterize much more with feldspathic than you can with lithium disilicate. But do not forget that this is around 500 megapascal of strength, while this is about 90 megapascal of strength. So we're talking about 5 folds, 5 times more strength of this prosthesis than that. 5 times more of the lithium disilicate strength than it is for the refractory feldspathic veneers. So you don't want to overlook this too. So you have to think about more than one factor. You have to think about masking, about translucency, about cementation. Cementation, they're the same family. They're both etchable, okay? So you can etch both and you can bond both in the same way. So you're talking, that factor is pretty much, set. But the other factors, you're talking about translucency, masking and everything, and or minimum preparation too. People say that, oh, feldspathic, you can build a feldspathic of 0.1, 0.2. Well, you can press 0.5, 0.3, 0.2. I will show some of my work too. Yes, it's hard to go less than 0.2 in fully pressed, of course, but you're talking about the same range, a 0.1, 0.2 difference in thickness. It does make a difference in certain cases, but I want you to keep in mind the difference in strength and the difference in other factors all together as a package, and think of it of what is the best prosthesis to be used in this case, based on mechanical properties, translucency, and cementation. All right, so there's more than one factor to think about when you want to choose as a team between the dentist and the dental lab technician what to use and how to fabricate this specific prosthesis for this specific case. So we talked about category 2, the family of category 2, subcategory 1 and 2 and 3, which is low to moderate low site containing, high low site containing, and lithium disilicate. And we said it's one family of category 2, which is high silica continent with fillers. So number one with category number 1 was high continent of silica with no fillers. Category number 2 was high continent silica with fillers. The fillers were lucite in both subcategory 1 and 2 with different continent, and then lithium disilicate in category 3, but they're the same family. Now we come to family 3, composition category 3. Category 3 is crystalline. Now we don't talk about lucite or lithium disilicate anymore, or silica. We're talking about totally different material, which is crystalline. Crystalline based systems with glass fillers. Yes, there is glass fillers, mainly alumina, but the cluster is crystalline based systems. Now this is the NCERAM alumina or NCERAM spinel, or Procera, but the solid centered alumina, not the category 1 powder liquid. Remember we said Procera comes in powder and liquid, and that's category 1, composition high in silica with no fillers. But this is the solid centered alumina, the Procera product, and it's not a powder liquid form, it's a solid centered alumina. Okay, Procera category 3. And you know that Procera all-ceram combination of strength and beauty has helped distinguish Nobel Biocare, as we know. That was the booming of Nobel Biocare back in the day, as a leader in tooth colored restoration. Since 1983, millions of dental patients have been treated with Procera worldwide. So Procera is a product of the category 3, composition category 3, which is crystalline based systems with alumina. All right, with fillers, mainly alumina. And then there's the fourth category, which is polycrystalline. All right, mostly alumina or zirconia. The example of it is zirconia. We talked about zirconia in detail, so we don't need to repeat that. Now there is tips about this category. These tips are mainly taken from Dr. Edward McLaren's notes on the classification, if I'm not mistaken, and others, but mostly Dr. Edward McLaren. So category 1 and 2 are etchable because they have silica, right? Category 1, high silica. Category 2, high in silica with fillers. They're both etchable. Lithium disilicate, lucite, Empress 1, Empress 2, feldspathic, they're all etchable. Category 1 and 2 are etchable. Crystalline based systems, category 1 and 2 are etchable because they are glass based systems. Now the crystalline based systems, category 3 and 4, are not etchable, but thus much more difficult to bond. All right, it's difficult to bond category 3 and 4. Now we're going to discuss if zircon is etchable or not later, like we said. Categories 1 through 3 can exist in powder form, all right, powder liquid form. Category 1, silica, and category 2, silica with fillers, and category 3, which is Procera, can exist in powder form as well. That's then fabricated using a wet brush technique, or they can also be processed into a block form that can be pressed or machined, right? Ingots, we can press the ingots, or we can CAD CAM or mill the blocks of these 1 through 3 categories. Now, as a general rule, powder liquid system have much lower strength, of course, like we said, like the feldspathic stacked porcelain over refractory or over platinum foil, tin foil, than pre-manufactured blocks because of a much larger amount of bubbles and flaws in the finished restoration. Of course, powder liquid systems are lower, have much lower strength. Now you're gonna find many classifications, like I pointed out before. So let's look at this. This is a different classification. I don't want to confuse you. That's why I put the simple, easy to remember classification in the beginning, but doesn't hurt to look at this. All right. There's the matrix, the filler, the process, the trademark. Now we're saying that this is like the high silica continent. See, aesthetic ceramic, veneering ceramic, powder, VM7. There's no pressed, it's only powdered, this first category here. Zirconia ceramics. Zirconia ceramics can be powder and can be pressed. Aluminosilicate glass, they call it, okay? Moderate lucite. A ceramic containing 5 to 10% lucite. Okay, it can be powdered or pressed like the IPS Emax Zerpress, for example, Vita VM13 powder for that category. Metal ceramic, higher lucite, 17 to 25% lucite, powder and pressed. There's VM13, and there's inline press over metal. There's PM9 from Vita. Then you're talking about different fillers here. Ceric Mark II. It's a category by itself. It's high in ceramics. Okay, there is lucite 14 to 50%, and now we're talking about Impress Aesthetic, which is Impress 1. Okay, ProCAD, Optic, Serenate, MyRage, I don't know what that is, but Serenate I know. Okay, so powder and pressable when it comes to lucite 40 to 50%. There is lithium disilicates now, low glass content, but high in lithium disilicates 70%, and now we're talking about Emax CAD and Emax Press. Over here we're talking about alumina spinel, alumina zirconia 70%, talking about Inceram alumina, Inceram spinel, and zirconia. No glass content, which is polycrystallines, not crystallines but polycrystallines. There is polycrystalline of alumina and polycrystalline of zirconia, deuterium stabilized zirconia with its brand names, and then Vita All Cube Procera. Okay, so this is a different classification. You may look at it and see what's going on here too, but I like the first classification. It's pretty simple. Now, handling tips for PFMs, layered glass ceramics, and layered Procera, Inceram, and layered zirconia. Because anything layered, at the end of the day, it's layered with porcelain, and mostly, not mostly, but some of it is low temperature porcelain, some of it's high temperature also, but at the end of the day, it's porcelain, and mostly it's synthetic porcelains. So the handling tips would be handling tips for porcelain, whether this porcelain is layered on top of glass ceramics, or on top of Inceram, or on top of Procera, or on top of zirconia. Because even from different companies like CM or Evocolor Vivadent, it's the same porcelain that you apply on top of zirconia or on top of lithium disilicate. It's the same temperatures almost, and it is the same temperatures and the same porcelain that's applied on top of that core. So it would be the same handling tips for that outer layer of porcelain. Now, there are many studies in all directions, but this is the strongest belief that at least parts of the prosthesis in contact with opposing dentition must be polished or reglazed after occlusal adjustment. Okay, we established that already. High rate of wear decreased over time, suggesting that the effect of surface roughness on wear may be self-limiting. Now, this is a study by Monsky and Taylor, and it suggests that even if you have a wear to the opposing, with time, this wear of opposing will affect the opposing and the prosthesis itself, and it will limit itself. Like after a while, it won't do any surface wear for the opposing anyway. So it's a time limiting, it's a self-limiting phenomena. So after a while, there is no wear. But the question is, how much wear is it gonna do? How much damage is it gonna do? Or is it gonna do much of a damage before it limit itself or not? In other words, why wouldn't you polish after occlusal adjustment or reglaze? That's your best. That's your top best. The best thing to do. All right, polish. Then, if not, glaze, but don't leave it, for wearing the opposing and assuming that it will limit itself after a while. Well, we don't know how much. We don't have a study to show how much damage it will do for the opposing before it limits itself. But it's at least it's good to know that it's a self-limiting process. Now, results of many studies confirm that chipping is the first cause of zirconia-based prosthesis failures. Of course, zirconia layered prosthesis chipping failures can be reduced by taking into account several risk parameters, such as the presence of ceramic restoration as an antagonist, all right? The presence of parafunctional activities, of course. You have to do your selective grinding and make sure that there is no premature contacts and all kind of stuff. The presence of implants as support. So the base is implant, like a zirconia crown on top of an implant, all right? Of course, the use of occlusal night guard can also decrease failure rates. Now, these are only considerations of chipping. Why does it happen? What parameters and risks could elevate that chance? All right. So, in other words, just to seal this part of the video, it's already 42 minutes. So let's this is the longest video so far. So let's seal this. Is there longevity studies regarding success rates of layered prosthesis? There is. What is the maximum layering thickness acceptable, or what do we mean by unsupported porcelain? Anything more than 2 mm of porcelain is unsupported porcelain. Practically speaking, should we glaze or polish layered prosthesis? We could do either or. It's easier, faster, and more effective to polish after occlusal adjustment. Alright, we will stop here this video and we will start monolithic versus layered comparison in the next recording. Thank you very much.